So, good day everyone. So, we are here again for the next video about the next module that we will going to discuss this day. So, what we have right here is now the module number 3. Yeah. So, this is the module number 3. So, before we move on or before we discuss this module number 3, let's have first let's have a question first. So given the idea that you have a time machine, right, supposedly just like the one in the anime Doraemon, the time machine is located under the on the drawer of Nobita. Yeah. So given the idea that you have your time machine, so alright, so what time would you like to go back and why? So, alright, so our module in biology has something to do with the time machine that we are talking about here. So, the time. So, alright, so what do we have right here in this module? Since on the first module, alright, so on the first module we discussed there the organ system. So we discussed there the organ system. Yeah. Yeah. So sorry for that. So in the first module we discussed there the organ system. There you go. System, mainly the nervous, nervous system. Nervous, we have endocrine and the reproductive system. Productive. Then on the second module, we have discussed there how about heredity. Yeah. Heredity. So mainly connected to DNA. Yan. We also include there the ideas about DNA, which is called the mutation. So this the idea about what will happen if the DNA sequence is changed. Yan. So there's this mutation. Now in this third module, we will combine the things that we have learned from the organ system and the things that we have learned on the DNA. So technically, we have the reproductive system and the DNA combined. So in the third module, we will talk about what will happen if the DNA sequence is changed, and at the same time, what will be the effect of reproduction, yan, in the production of an individual and the mutation that the changes in the DNA happened in that particular individual. So technically, we will going to discuss in this module the term evolution. So we will going to answer the question how evolution happens. Yan. So why it makes it controversial? So this evolution has something to do with our prior discussion about the reproductive system and the DNA. So let's take a look. So in this case, in this topic that we will going to have, so this is the first topic about evolution. So we will going to trace the evolutionary history of the organism in this planet. So not only the organism, but what the planet looks like in the past, yan, and how does it affect the organism that lives during that time. So we will try to find out what is this macroevolution all about. So before we start, the question that we will going to answer here is the formation of the earth affects the adaptation of the organism lives on it. Yan. So we were going to find out if really the movement of the continents, from Pangaea down to the 7 continents that we have, has an effect on the evolution of the organism that we all know. So tracing the evolutionary history. Alright, so let's proceed. Alright, so what do we have right here? We have the geologic time scale. So as we all know, alright, so how do we know that there are organisms or there are living things that lives in the past? So We cannot see them right now because they are dead long time ago, so around billion to million years ago. So how do we find out that there are organisms that lives during that time? So we will use what they call the geologic time scale. So what is this geologic time scale? So the geologic time scale, as you can see here, this is the chronological event, yan, both biologically and geographically. So this is the chronological event that happens on the Earth on those concepts. Yan, biologically, what are the organisms that lives on those certain years in the Earth, and geologically, what is the shape, or what is the size of the Earth, or what is the continents, or how many continents during that time is present during in which the organism lives. Yan. Alright, so this picture that we have right here, this is a clear example of geologic time scale. It is divided into era, furthermore divided into period, and furthermore divided into epoch. Yeah. So as of now, we are now in the quaternary period. So this is the present period. We are in the present period now. So let's proceed. Alright, so these are the divisions of your geologic time scale. We have eons, we have era, we have periods, and we have epoch. Yeah. Alright, so none last equal intervals of time based on the event. So these are the events. So according to some geologists, they be able to establish this geologic time scale based on some precise estimation rather. Yan. So you have your how many million years that that particular period lasts, and over it there are some organisms lives under that particular period or even an era. Yan. So for example, we have the dinosaurs. Alright, so dinosaurs are mostly dominated the Earth in Triassic Period. Alright, so some of them make way through the Cretaceous Period. Then humans first appear at around Tertiary Period. Yeah, so something like that. So there are some organisms that lives in a given particular time period. Yeah. So next one. So this is the further diagram that will further classify what happened geologically and or rather biologically happened, or what are the organisms present in a particular period of time. So as I've said, yan, so an organism is dominating on a certain period, but the same organism is not seen on the next period. So maybe why? So why such organism like the one that we have right here are not seen on the next period? So what do you think happened to those organisms? Next one, in plants, there are some organisms that are seen in certain period of time, but some organism on that period didn't will not be we are not be able to see it, or we have be able to see it on the present period that we have. So why is that? So this is the biological diagram of what are the animals and plants that lives in a particular period of time. Alright, next one. So, on the first period that we have right here, this is the Cambrian Period. So, as you can see, you think that there are some organisms that lives here in this period. So, if you think so, just write it in the comment section. What organism lives, what do you think is the organism that lives in this particular period? Alright, this is the Cambrian Period. Alright, so in the Cambrian Period, there are some organisms present there. So these are some oddly looking plants underneath the ocean. Yan. So these are some shrimp-like creatures. Yan. Alright, so what do you notice? Alright, so most organisms during that time is or are underwater. Yeah. So they are underwater. Yeah. Next one, this is the Paleozoic era. Yan. So there are some minor organisms that can live on land, right? That can fly on the surface. Yan. And most of the organisms are found underwater. So there you go. This is the Paleozoic era. Okay. Then as we progress, those simple organisms that are found in the water becomes more and more complex. Yan. So what do you think is the reason why they are become more and more complex? Yan. So does it have something to do with their food? Does it have something to do with their habitat? Yan. So yan, what do you think? Yan. Just write it in the comment section. All right, next one. So we have the Jurassic era. So how do I know? So we have here the dinosaurs. So most of the dinosaurs that we know dominated the planet Earth during the Jurassic period. Alright, so that's the Jurassic period. Some reptiles are present in the both land and water. Yeah? They dominated land and water. Yeah? So some ferns, fully grown ferns present on the land that serves as the food for these gigantic organisms that we have right here. Alright, next one. So this is another picture of what the Jurassic era looks like. So as you can see, larger ferns, yan, plants with taller stems. Yan. Okay, next one. Alright, so this is the Quaternary, or somehow the present period. So yan, we have we see in this picture the animals like elephants. Yan, so prehistoric elephants, yan, prehistoric armadillos. Then we have birds, yan. So most likely some of these elephants, prehistoric elephants, died off already, but their nearby, or their cousin, the modern elephants, are still here. So somehow those modern elephant looks like what they look like what their prehistoric ancestor look like, right? So much smaller, I think. Yeah. Right, next one. So this is the present period. So as you can see here, modern animals like hippopotamus, yan, rhinos. There you go. You have monkeys. Yan. So these are modern animals that are seen today. So even though this rhino is somewhat odd, yan, so maybe this is a primitive rhino that lived long time ago. And there are some large birds, yan, carnivorous birds. Alright, so yan, some of these animals still lives today, but others didn't make it. Yan. So that's this is the present period. Alright, so if we will going to trace back, if we will put it in a clock, yan, the Quaternary period just happened 17 seconds ago. So there you go. So the Quaternary just happened 17 seconds ago. So if we will put it this way, so the edge of your fingernail is the Quaternary period. Then the length of your fingernails that grow over time, those are the periods in time that passed before it. So Tertiary, Cretaceous, etc., etc. So technically, the fingers that you have right here, the fingers is the remaining, the first period. So the primitive period, or the prehistoric period, the primitive one. So in which the bacteria dominated the planet. So this Archean period is somewhat somewhere in the fingers. Yeah. So yeah. Technically, that's how it looks like. Yeah. Alright, so what do we have right here? This is the Grand Canyon. So the question here, can we find different fossils at different layers of this Grand Canyon? So if you have an answer, just write it in the comment section. But technically, it's yes. Alright, so the Grand Canyon is one of the marvelous work of nature in which it showcased different layers. It showcased different layers, weathered layers, and those layers probably we might find one organism or fossilized organisms on it. So by the way, so what is this fossils all about? So fossils are the remains of prehistoric organisms. Yan. So fossils. So when they die, they will be burrowed on the ground, and then due to weathering, so they will likely to be exposed on the ground, and then yeah. So if the scientists dug up on that particular area, they will be able to find out some bones, some crystallized structures. Yeah. So these are fossils. So example here is the Grand Canyon. So we can find fossils in every layer of this Grand Canyon. Next one. Alright, so as I've said earlier, the geologic time scale is the system of chronologic measurement relating to stratigraphy. So what do we mean by stratigraphy? These are the layers. Yeah. So these are so-called layers. Layers of what? Layers of rocks. Yeah. Layers of rocks. To time that is used by geologists. So who use the geologic time scale? Somehow it is used by geologists and other earth scientists like biologists, paleontologists, and so on and so forth. Alright, so that's how important geologic time scale is. Next one, what are the proof that there are living things in the past? Do you think that there are evidences that there are living things in the past? Of course, yes. Alright? Of course, yes. This earth was not born yesterday. So, most probably, we will likely to find out some living things that lives in the past in a form of what they call fossils. So, obviously, we will not be able to see them alive, but their fossilized remain will still be there. Yan. Although some fossils are preserved nicely, but others are not. Yan. So, these are the evidences of life that there's living things in the past. These are fossil types. So, in this area, in this section, we will going to discuss what are the different types of fossils. Alright, so, Omanite and Aerodactyl. So, yeah. Alright, so first is the cast. Right, so as you can see, in the cast, there is what they call a depression. Alright. So there's a depression. So it's in this case, this is likely a foot of a dinosaur, which is somehow the dinosaur stepped on the mud and then leaving a depression of its footprint. Yan. So of its foot. Yan. So technically, this is the footprint of that dinosaur. So in this picture, this is the T-Rex's footprint. Alright, so that's the cast. So depression. Alright, so you see here, yan. So you see here the depression created by that foot. Okay, depression. Next one, we have the mold. Alright, so what happened? What is this mold all about? So the mold is just the mold is a type of fossil in which the organism decayed, and what remained here is the hardest part of the organism. Example, shells, yan, bones, something like that. So in this case, we have the shell of a prehistoric underwater organism. So its soft body disintegrate or decayed, but its hard shell remains. So the hard shell remains, and as you can see here, you can create an exact replica of that particular shell because that shell leaves a mold in it, in the rock that is preserved in it. Yeah, so that's the mold. All right, next one, imprints. All right, so this is a type of fossils which is caused by certain organisms like the leaves, the feathers, which cause an imprint. So imprint, so an impression, yan, from the word from the imprint, so impression. So it leaves an impression. Just it is same as the cast, but not deeper as the cast. So it leaves a light impression on a sedimentary rock. So there you go. So as you can see here, this particular shell leaves an impression on the sedimentary rock, and that shell is, or that impression is preserved over time. Then we call it now the imprint. So we have now an idea what the shell looks like because it leaves a pattern, yan, in the sedimentary rock. Alright, next one, Petrification. So petrification is somewhat seen on plants that lived long time ago. So in this case, the organic materials in your plants, which is the plants are mainly most of tissues yan. These tissues are replaced by calcium carbonate. So we have calcium carbonate. Okay? So it is replaced by calcium carbonate. And then what happens when it is replaced by calcium carbonate? It is hardened, like the one like the wood that you see here. So it is hardened. Then once it hardens, it is the tree trunk that you see here is being preserved over time. Yan. So this the calcium carbonate made it harden so that it can be preserved over a long period of time. So that's petrification. Next one, we have the amber. Yan. So if you happen to see the Jurassic Park movie, so the amber, what makes it looks like this way? So the amber looks like this because this orange thing that we have right here, this is a sap. Yan. This is a sap from a tree. Yan, that caught the insect off guard, and then the sap hardens, then afterwards the sap detaches from the tree and then falls to the ground and then preserved over a long period of time. So this is the sap, or in other terms, this is the resin, yan, coming from any tree. And then it caught the insect off guard and then it is preserved inside. So the insect did not undergo decay. So the insect is preserved well inside this resin. So that's an amber, right? Next one. What do you mean by fossil? So as you can see there, those organisms that you see that are fossilized, these are prehistoric organisms. So technically, a fossil is a prehistoric remains of organism that lived long time ago. And so that's how we define fossil, right? So next. Alright, so how do we define, how do scientists find out the ages of fossils? So if you happen to see science news, like some fossilized elephant's bone, yan, the mastodon, yan, was aged around 1,000 years ago, yan, that the elephant lives around 1,000 years ago. So how did they be able to do that one? So they do it using radiometric dating. So this is a technique used by geologists. So not only geologists, also the paleontologists, yan, paleontologists, in determining the age of rocks, not only rocks but the fossils in it. So as we all know that all organisms are made up of carbon. So when they transform, they become a radioactive carbon form, which is the carbon-14. Yan. So not only carbon, there are some elements that is used in radiometric dating. We have nitrogen, we have cobalt, yan, we have uranium, yan. So we have also potassium. So there are a lot of elements that are used in radiometric dating. So carbon dating is one of an example. Yan. So alright. So for example, your measurement indicate that carbon-14 is yan, you unearthed that a fossilized skull you unearthed has a carbon-14 to carbon-12 ratio of about 1/16 that of the atmosphere. So what is the approximate age of the skull? So in this case, so 1/16. So alright, so if we will going to take a look at this graph, so we will be able to answer that question. So as the original number of atoms of your element decreases, yan, we called it half-life. Yan. So in this case, the original number of atoms as it decreases, yan, its half-life, yan. So as it decreases by 1/2, its half-life also decreases. Yan. So that's the original number of the original number of the isotope in a dating sample. So as as the original number of atoms becomes 1/8, so it decreases. Yan. So, yan. The number of half-lives is around, this is per year. Yan. So, 1/8. Yan. So, 1/8. So, 1, 2, 3. Then, on 1/8, original number of atoms, so the half-life of that is 3 years. Yan. So, the half-life of that sample is 3 years. So, how will we be able to answer this one? So, 1/16 that of the atmosphere. So, what do we have right here? So, how do we be able to, what is the approximate age of the skull? So, we have 14. So, carbon 14 to carbon 12. So 1/16. So, the answer here is around 14,000 years old. Yeah. Alright, so there you go. Now, if you have questions, how did I get up with the answer on this question? So we will, alright, so we will answer it. Just leave it in the comment section. Alright, so there you go. So that's the radiometric dating. So take note that not only carbon is available for can be used for radiometric dating. So we can use potassium, we can use nitrogen, and basically all elements. Yeah. All right. So the heavier the elements, I think the more possible, or sabihin natin, it is highly possible to detect how long that the organism lives. Yan. Even if it is billion years old fossil. Yan. So, yeah. Alright, so there you go. Next one. So, okay, so in this section, we will try to find out the role of continental drift in evolution. So, as you recall, in the first quarter, we'll be able to discuss the continental drift by Alfred Wegener. So, he said that all continents that we have right here today, which is the 7 continents, came from one supercontinent called Pangaea. Now, do you think that kind of movement by continents or by the landmass here on Earth has something to do with evolution of the organism? So, if they do, what do you think is the reason, or what will happen? Yan. So, what do you think is the reason why the organism evolved due to the movement of the continents here on Earth? Yeah. Alright, so this is what the Cambrian Period looks like. So, as you can see, this is somehow look like a Pangaea, as what Alfred Wegener discussed. So, then the Devonian Period. So, we have now the Gondwana, yan, the Euro-America, something like that. Yeah. So we have the Permian Period. So the Pangaea is starting to separate. Then as you can see, there are now the glimpse of your continents over here. Yan. So the 7 continents that we have. Next one, the Triassic Period. So in the Triassic Period, so what do we have right here? Yan. So alright, so the continents are starting to separate each other. So, yan. So, we have one common ocean. Yan. Okay. Next one, the Cretaceous Period. So, as you can see, the 7 continents are starting to form. Next one, the Quaternary Period. This is the continents that we have right now. So, as you can see, as long that there are plate boundaries that is present around the continental landmass that we have right here, the plate boundaries, the divergent one, the transform one, and the convergent one. So these continents are not likely to be in a constant place. So it will continue to move million years from now. So the continents that we see right now are continually moving because of those plates that we discussed during the Earth science in first period. So how does this movement affect the evolution of the organism? Alright, so as you can see, this is an example of how the continents affect the evolution of the individual organism that we have right here. So example here, we have the lungfish. Alright, so there are lungfish that are found in the Australia, there are found in the Africa, there are lungfish that are found in South America, and these are the lungfish during the earliest period of time. Alright, so what do you notice? So if you notice something, just write it in the comment section. So as you see here, they look the same. They look the same. Alright, so they look like the same. The only difference is their body parts. Yan. They only differs in body parts, and basically their tail fins are almost the same. Yan. Their color is different. Minor differences in color, yan. But the most important here is one lungfish is found in Australia, the one is found in Africa, and the one that is found in South America. So what do you think happened here? Alright, so what do you think happened here? Why there are lungfishes found in different regions? Alright, next one. Not only, yan. So this is the answer to that question. So the lungfish, yan, so are found in different regions of this planet. So, yan, so the brown one are the fossilized lungfish, and the living lungfishes are found in flesh. Yan. So, yan. So as you can see, why is it that the lungfishes are found in different regions of the earth? So, just leave it in the comment section. So, next one. Not only the lungfish, but also the marsupial mammals that we knew, like the kangaroo, yan, the wombat. So marsupial mammals, they put their young inside a pouch. So these are pouch bearing mammals, yan. So alright, so marsupial. So as you can see, marsupials as well are scattered around the different continents of this planet. So why is it so? Alright, how is that possible? Alright, so how is that possible that one marsupial is seen in one continent over the other? Alright, so okay, so those are some animals that are found in different continents but closely related to each other. So most probably one answer is probably those organisms are during the first, or during the formation of the continents. Since the continents are once connected to each other, those organisms are also connected to each other. So they live in one place, they live in one form of habitat, then so on and so forth. Then when the continents separated, number of population of these organisms are also separated as well. So they likely to adapt to a new environment. So that is why those organisms looks similar but differently in terms of body size or something like that in their relative organism. So that's probably one of the explanation there why those organisms are closely related but completely different to each other. Yan. So alright, so what do we have right here? So what is the effect of what are the events on the earth that has something like leaves an imprint, or that allows the life to evolve? So let's try to find out. So one, volcanoes. Alright, so one of the that causes danger during the time to the organism living on those prehistoric time is are the volcanoes. So when the volcanoes erupt, so probably this organism will likely to be buried by lava or volcanic ashes, so on and so forth. Yeah. Alright, mountains. Alright, so as the mountain forms, it causes an earthquake. Then the earthquakes kill some organism. So as they kill some organism, and these organisms are likely to evolve. Why? Because so maybe they are living they are once living in a particular flatland, then the mountain formed in between those flatlands, then they are likely to be isolated. So once you have your isolation, once you are geographically isolated, you are likely to evolve. Yeah, so that's mountain. So maybe there are organisms that lives here, and there are organisms that lives on the other side of this mountain. So that's mountains. Next one, earthquakes. So earthquakes can cause geographical isolation to some organism. Remember how continents are formed? It's because of some earthquakes that happened millions years ago. So the continents are separated, thus some organisms are geographically isolated to their relative relative ancestors. So, or relative organisms. Yan. So, something like that. So, just like the lungfishes, they are once located in one place. Then, when the continental drift happened, those lungfishes in one kind of population, they are separated, then they tend to adapt to a new form of environment. That's the reason why we have so many kinds, or there are 3 kinds of lungfishes that we seen there. Alright, next one. Alright, so how are these features affects evolutionary history of life? So as I've said earlier, the movement of the land, alright, so the movement of the land affects how life will adapt to a certain environment. So if the landmass is once located in the equator, then it moved and then located in the pole region. So technically, the organisms that lives there must adapt in order to survive. So yeah, so 1. Alright, so those features, those massive volcanic eruption, earthquakes, yan. So it causes mass extinction. Now, I will leave a question here. So how does mass extinction affects the formation of new organism? You think so? If you think so, how? Alright, so how mass extinction be an advantage somehow in making new forms of organism? So, mass extinction can happen through different periods of time. So, as you can see here, every boundary that you see here, so there are new organisms introduced to the environment. There you go. So, meaning to say that in every period that you see here, there is always an extinction event that happened. Alright, so there's always an extinction event that happened. So, and every extinction event that happened, it kills majority of the organism, but some organism retain, and then they be able to adapt, they be able to survive all throughout that kind of environment, and they be able to survive. Yan, they be able to adapt, and then they be able to evolve somehow. So that's why. All right, next one. All right, so we have here the oxygen catastrophe. So this is one of the major extinction that happened in the planet millions of years ago. So in the oxygen catastrophe, so non-oxygen breeders, non-oxygen using bacteria are likely to be extinct because of some bacteria that creates the first oxygen on Earth, which is called the cyanobacteria. So, yan. So, I put the link in YouTube. So, I put the link in YouTube in the comment section so that you will be able to watch how this catastrophe happened. Yan. So, yan. So, it kills off nearly billions of non-oxygen breathers, yan, bacterias, because of the presence of the oxygen. So these are lethal during that time. This oxygen is lethal during that time. Next one, gamma ray burst. So somehow in the near or in the past, all right, so the Earth is bombarded with large amount of gamma rays coming from a supernova or somewhat interstellar explosion. Yeah, so that's a gamma ray burst. And once the planet is hit with this one, all life forms is eradicated. But somehow there are some few life forms that manage to survive. Yeah, so they be able to adapt to a new form of environment, and so on and so forth. All right, next one, global cooling. So actually, global warming is somehow a natural event, but humans are accelerating that particular event. So that is the reason why there are drastic changes, accelerated changes in an environment that is happening today. So this global cooling, this is the shifting of temperature from cold to warm, every million years. Every million years in such, yan, in my estimate. So there's a shifting in temperature. So those shifting of temperature tends to cause extinction events in some organism. So there are some organisms that can adapt on cold temperature, and there are some in warm temperature. So they will likely to die, and those who survive, they will likely to adapt. Then when they adapt, they evolve. Yan. So next one. Alright, so asteroid impact. So we all know that asteroids are the one who killed the dinosaurs. So one massive asteroid that hits the Earth is seen today in the Gulf of Mexico. Yan. So this is the Chicxulub crater that is found in the Gulf of Mexico. Yan. This is a large asteroid hits the Earth, and then this creates changes in temperature, changes in the amount of sunlight that enters to the Earth, and then technically global cooling happens, and then those organisms that cannot adapt on that temperature dies, and those organisms that can adapt survive. Yan. And then when they survive, they evolve totally. Yan. So that's the asteroid impact. Alright, so imagine how large that impact crater is, and the effect of that impact to the living things or living organism living during that time. Alright, so global sea drop. Alright, so self-explanatory, global sea drop. Okay, next one. How does mass extinction event be an advantage? So, how mass extinction event be an advantage? So, one thing, alright, it is an advantage because it allows the organism to adapt to a new kind of environment, and then as they adapt, they be able to reproduce, and they be able to produce offspring which which enables them to adapt to the new environment and then survive. And so that's how mass extinction. Although nature is brutal, but the thing here, this is the only way nature selects organism who will adapt and who will survive. Yan. So technically mass extinction is not that bad at all. Yan. Alright, so how does macroevolution related to the evolution of the organism? So what is this macroevolution? So as you can see, yan, from the first question, is the formation of the continents has something to do with the evolution of the organism here on Earth? Alright, somehow? Yes. Alright, so technically what is macroevolution? So macroevolution, this is an evolution in which it studies how the formation of the Earth affects the evolution of every organism. So from the word macro, this is the larger view of evolution. So in this case, in this kind of evolution, we will study here how the Earth itself affects the evolution of the organism. So there you go. Alright, so what you have learned today, so there you go. And that's the end of our discussion regarding the records of life. So as you can see, one lesson is that I will impart you here in this particular discussion, that life goes on. Alright, so whatever happens, alright, whatever mass extinction event happens, life always finds a way. Alright, so there you go. That ends up our discussion for today, the records of life. Thank you and God bless.